I'm actually doing politics and IR as my
Politics
major.
and IR.
Video influencers.
I'm from JSI and I'm doing
And so you can actually take courses across different schools, right? There are lots of.
Session on emergence of BRICS plus a way to a multipolar order. I am Professor Dr. Hibatullah Adam, and I'm founder and director of Jindal Center for the Global South and associate director of Jindal India Institute. I will be moderating today's session. We are honored to have today two distinguished guests with us. First, we have my esteemed guest, Ambassador Sanjay Bhattacharya and Professor V. Upadhyay. I will start first by giving you a brief introduction about my two esteemed guests. Ambassador Sanjay Bhattacharya was a member of the Indian Foreign Service, former secretary in Ministry of External Affairs, former ambassador to Switzerland, Turkey, and Egypt, Sherpa to BRICS during India's presidency, young diplomat in Bangladesh, Japan, Belgium, China, and Hong Kong. Currently, he's adjunct professor at Jindal School of International Affairs, OP Jindal Global University. Ambassador Bhattacharya is a specialist in boundary and security issues, economic diplomacy, diaspora and negotiations. He led policy making on Act East and Indo-Pacific, Middle East mobility and migration, diaspora affairs, and passport and consular services. He's experienced in diplomacy in the era of globalization and transformative change. So welcome, Ambassador Bhattacharya, and thank you for joining our session today. Professor Upadhyay is former professor and head of the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences at IIT Delhi. He is also SK Day chair professor at ISS New Delhi. He has area taught in IIT Kanpur and University of Rajasthan in India, and many of universities in Canada, like University of Brunswick, University of PEI, Canada, and McMaster University. His research interests are in the areas of development economics, Indian and political economy. He has published about 100 of research papers in Indian and international journals, and he has authored and co-edited several books about the Indian economy and political economy. Lately, he has his latest book publication, Global Political Economy, a critique of contemporary capitalism. He is an author, the signatory of the Indian Political Economy Association, and member of Steering Council of the World Association of Political Economy. So before we start, please join me in giving a warm welcome to Ambassador Sanjay and Professor Upadhyay. Before we delve into our discussion today, let's first start by briefly introducing the concept of BRICS Plus. BRICS, which is representing Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, has been a key player in global landscape. However, with the addition of new members, namely Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and United Arab Emirates, the concept of BRICS Plus has emerged, sparking discussions about the potential shift towards a multipolar world order where there is a coexistence of several powers, not only the North powers, but also we are talking about there will be also the global South will be on the scene, and we will have that voice of global South with led by India. So that coexistence of new powers in international system, collective security, and negotiated settlement of international conflicts. So now let's start by our discussion, and I would like to start first by one general question to my two esteemed guests. So I would like to start by asking you, in your perspective, what are the key factors driving the emergence of BRICS Plus, and what are the potential implications for the global order? So let's start first by Ambassador Sanjay.
Thank you, Professor Heba. Thanks for inviting us to this seminar and to discuss the recent expansion of BRICS, and also to discuss the issue of Global South. Firstly, I think to set the stage, I feel that we are in an era of transformation. And in this era of transformation, it's not just the role of technology, which is changing our lives and our economic systems, but also there is transformation in the geostrategic order. And in this change of geostrategic order, the participation and role of what's now called the Global South has increased in its value and its contribution. We've seen from the very beginning, I don't think Tim O'Neill, who had thought of the idea of BRIC way back in 2001, that he would have anticipated the manner in which it has grown. It started off as a grouping of 4 countries, and after 2 summits, India, Brazil, Russia, and China added South Africa to its fold. And since then, BRICS has also had an approach in which there has been a BRICS outreach or a BRICS Plus, which has been organized at each session, particularly at the summit. And this has varied. For instance, there was a time when South Africa brought members of the African Union. There was a time when India brought members of the BIMSTEC into the forum. There was a time when Russia brought the members of the SCO, and China brought members from Africa and ASEAN into it. So this practice of BRICS having a larger participation has been there for some time. The second aspect in which the larger participation of BRICS has been there has been in some of its specific activities. One of the key bodies or institutions of BRICS has been the New Development Bank. And in the New Development Bank, which started with 5 members, the BRICS original 5, there was an expansion of membership so that they could contribute to the capital of the NDB. The NDB, right from the outset, had projects which went beyond the BRICS 5 members. But when it introduced new members, and you would recall Egypt, United Arab Emirates, Bangladesh, and Uruguay had joined the NDB as new members. It added a broader geographical spread into the decision-making process. I think the main reason why a body like BRICS came about was because of the need for development and the fact that technology and geostrategic changes had made it possible to leapfrog the stages of development. The second reason was that this would provide a wide-ranging platform for collaboration in a range of different sectors and to give voice to a voice that was not always held at the global governance tables. And that's where the Global South becomes very relevant. And the third reason why BRICS was very important and continues to be even more so is because BRICS has always had a future-oriented agenda as well. So today, when we are looking at issues such as artificial intelligence and robotics, or when we are looking at the cyber world and for new peace and security initiatives around, the BRICS has a very significant role to play. So I would say BRICS over a period of time through its work method, which is largely based on consensus, has been able to provide an alternative view and an alternative approach and a way forward, particularly for developing countries. And now with the new expansion, I think it'll get even more muscle to do that, and also to bring about the changes in global governance that is extremely necessary. There are some, I feel, who sometimes tend to think that BRICS is a body which is, in a sense, opposed to other existing bodies, for instance, the G7 or something else, or is it opposed to the United States and its alliance structures? And I think it couldn't be further from the fact, because right from the outset, the way in which BRICS has moved ahead, and mind you, the original BRICS 5 are all members of the G20, and almost all the new members are also participants of the G20. So it shows that, it goes beyond these narrow group identities or opposition to alliances. I think it's a positive agenda that BRICS has, and that's the way it'll go forward.
Yes, thank you for this that opening remark. I request, please, Professor Bhai to share his insights.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Edwin, for inviting both of us to talk about this very important phenomena of BRICS. BRICS now has become BRICS Plus, and this year there's a possibility actually that more countries may be invited to join BRICS also. So, but then actually we are also looking at the question of multipolarity. So what is the connection between, these two things? So that's what the topic of the presentation today is, to draw a link between this phenomena BRICS plus and multipolarity. So as actually like some introduction is already has been given about how BRICS came about. When it was initially this idea was formulated, it didn't really mean much. Like it was basically for some cooperation, economic cooperation between some of these countries. South Africa got added actually later on, as mentioned by Ambassador Bhattacharya and so on. But now actually, then what is the significance? What is the meaning of BRICS leading towards multipolarity? What is the role of BRICS in this new world order and so on? So very briefly, I have some views, actually, my own views on the subject, which may be different from views which is generally prevalent among the IR community and so on. So let's look at very briefly. I actually came out with a formal kind of reading, but I don't think that's needed now. So look at very brief history. So after the post-World War history and so. So when after Second World War, we had winning countries. We have countries which lost the war, Germany, Japan, and so on. But it also meant actually that European powers also lost their weight, importance in the post-war era. So America became the new leader, replacing UK and England. That was before that and so on. But one thing also happened that time is that there was another country, Soviet Union, which also, emerged as victorious country during the war and so on. So that's that's why we call, this period bipolar period, the period of Cold War, meaning that it was not one country which was totally dominant and so on, but two countries were there which were very powerful. If we don't even want to compare economically, that at least in military terms and so on. And the Soviet Union had played very important role in defeating Germany. So that we all know and so on. So this period is referred to as period of bipolarity or Cold War period. So you had one system led by America, usually referred to as the capitalist system and so on, and then the other system, socialist system, led by Soviet Union. But we also had then other countries joining the socialist part, China, Cuba, and so on, and places like that, and so on, North Korea, and so that way. Now, this period of bipolarity meant that other countries, so many countries actually got independence. During that period, the Second World War period, India is one of them. So 47, China 49, and many countries. Some African countries actually got independence later on, but a large number of countries became independent during that period. So that period actually, if you look at, bipolar period had this particular characteristics in the sense that it offered a choice to many newly independent countries. Like the pressure to join one group was not that great. They had a choice. You could, align towards America or Soviet Union, or even, this possibility that a large number of countries chose to be what we call non-aligned. So a NAM movement and non-aligned movement. So, where we had even, our Prime Minister Nehru was one of the leaders with Tito and Nasser and so on, Egypt. So that way. So that meant that some relative independence was there for the countries which were newly independent, which got political independence that time. But what happens actually, this system lasted only till 1990 and so. And when you had the complete collapse of the Soviet Union, and we had breakup of Soviet Union, we have 15, 16 countries actually came out of that. And this system also changed in East European countries, which were earlier socialist countries. And so the complete collapse of the ideology of the other camp, the socialist ideology, the communist ideology, and so on. And also, we also know that what was happening in China that time, the Deng Xiaoping period, the reforms. So much focus was shifted actually from politics which was there during the Mao's period, towards this economic aspects, which the Deng Xiaoping propagated this idea and so on. But one thing that emerged from that whole thing, global change in global order, was that you have a very, exceptional period in world history where one power became so dominant and there was no comparable power actually who could challenge the hegemony of that power. Like, remember actually the earlier period, European, there were so many countries, France, England, Germany, many. So never in history you had one country dominating the globe total, universe total, globe that way. So this is a period of what we call as a period of unipolarity, where American dominance was complete. Soviet Union got broken up in many pieces and so on. Russia, what we call Russian Federation, actually is the largest part of that. In terms of economy, in terms of society, politics, it was completely ruined. Complete collapse actually was there and so. Only one thing was there, that they retained their military power, atomic weapons and so on. So military challenge was there, but in other sense, they were not in any position. Actually, if you look at history, so during 1990s, what kind of decline Russian Federation, as well as all these countries which we call Ukraine and so on, so many countries which were part of Soviet Union. So in terms of every terms, in terms of economy, in terms of even, issues like average life expectancy, kind of joblessness, people leaving these countries, going outside, complete collapse. Then you have, after 10 years period, you have a new leader who is still continuing, Putin. And slowly then actually, you have the re-emergence of that earlier kind of power level, which they were able to project earlier and so on. So you have almost 20 years. Up to 2010, up to 2015, this period, which is called period of 25 years, we call it period of unipolarity. That means, okay, complete hegemony by one superpower. They could do anything. Nobody was there to check them. For example, during this period, you remember how they were able to assemble large forces to attack Iraq or Afghanistan, whoever, Syria, Libya, anywhere. Syria, they were, not able to do completely because that is the time when not Soviet Union, but Russia sort of, gained some strength and tried to intervene. So that is the period around 2014. So that is also the period when you had problem in Ukraine, Crimea, and so on. So up to that period, like for example, 2014, I consider to be the dividing line where this complete hegemony gets some challenge from some quarters and so. But then actually something else happens, that China also during this period acquires a lot of strength, economic strength, and so on. So this whole Deng Xiaoping project that and don't talk much, remain silent and focus on economy, let's have economic development. So this 20-30 years period, so that gave them time to have economic build-up and so on. And now we all know that Chinese economy is much larger than the American economy. It be huge. This concept of purchasing power parity and so on. So America is not the largest economy in PPP terms, but China. Obviously, we also know that Chinese per capita income is only about $12,000 or something. Whereas American per capita income is 70,000-80,000. So that difference is there. But given that China is 4 times larger in population and so on, so that way. And PPP measures are different actually. Some people nowadays actually want to talk more in PPP terms rather than the official nominal exchange rate using that. So that way China is much higher. So what is the the issue here? The issue is that now the American hegemony, the period of unipolarity, all those things actually get challenged now. By whom? Basically by China, because they acquired the economic strength, and slowly they are also acquiring military strength and so on. Plus, actually, Russia also in 20 years period, I mean, Putin's period is now more than 20 years. He started in 2000, so 24 now. So they also kind of revived the economy, almost that economy which had completely collapsed. So that is actually the credit that goes to the present leadership of Russia. So now, I mean, they have come to this level and have started asserting in global matters and so on. And now, I mean, we have the friendship between China and Russia and so on. So that is what, I mean, some strength, some power, which is able to challenge the American hegemony. So this is what is actually this is the new period in that sense. So that's how we connect with the history also. So bipolar period and unipolar period. One actually feature of unipolar period was that almost all countries lost their independence. No country really could say anything. Like suppose you talk about this Middle Eastern, I mean, wars and so on, Iraq war. There was no country on earth actually which could say anything about when they had war in Iraq, Afghanistan, places like that. So no challenge from anywhere. So Russia was too weak. China was also, I mean, only emerging and so on, and no other power was there to challenge American hegemony in any sense, military, economic, politically, diplomatically, at UN, anywhere like that. So now this period, I mean, this new period is called multipolar period. Multipolar means actually, I personally consider that the period of unipolarity has ended. And you have now emergence of several powerful countries. Obviously, if you want to name two countries, so obviously these will be China and Russia. But now there are a large number of countries actually, which are also, may not be superpowers, but they are powerful enough. India is one of them. And also many other countries. For example, you talk about Turkey, Iran, Brazil, Indonesia, and so many places, South Africa. So there are many other countries which are not called superpowers, but they're powerful enough. India being actually one of the top among those next line of countries and so on. So this is the meaning of multipolarity. So multipolarity makes only sense if you want to use this term to say that we are challenging unipolarity. Now, I mean, as Ambassador Bhattacharya is mentioning, actually, there are different views on this subject, about what multipolarity means. But I consider multipolarity, I mean, to be a concept which is different from the concept like, okay, we have national interest, we have autonomy, strategic autonomy, which largely focus on self-interest of the nations. So, but that is not multipolarity actually. Multipolarity, I consider that has some ideological component, meaning that there is some challenge now to unipolarity, which was missing earlier and so. So in that context, I mean, we can connect 2-3 more minutes, couple of minutes.
Because we still have more questions. But
Yeah,
we
yes.
summarize.
Yeah, so to summarize the things, yeah. So I mean, BRICS actually fits in there. In what way? I mean, since we don't have much time, actually, one important aspect of unipolarity of dominance, American hegemony, is this economic aspect of dominance of dollars. In terms of actually how much that is used in global investment, in trade and reserves and everything and so on. Briefly, but what had recently happened is that America and the Western countries are trying to weaponize actually those strengths they have, the monetary things, and the dollar dominance, by imposing sanctions on other countries. For example, sanctions on Russia, 13 rounds, 14 rounds, and so on. They, I mean, removed actually Russia from SWIFT network, and they, I mean, they have frozen actually $300 billion worth of Russian assets, and very recently they are threatening, okay, that they will confiscate those assets and so on. So here comes BRICS actually. So one important aspect where BRICS can play a role, or quite likely maybe playing role, is that join together to come up with alternatives to dollar hegemony, in that way. So this alternative to shift paradigm, alternative to the reserve status of dollar, coming out with possibly, I mean, we don't know about these things, but common BRICS currency and so on. So last thing is that I want to say is that actually this year is very crucial, because this year the presidency of BRICS is with Russia, with Putin, and so on. Earlier it was South Africa, and Russia is very keen to challenge the dollar hegemony in that way. So since they have suffered so much, and China also fears that they could suffer. So this year there will be move on the part of Russia to at least propose something, come out with some alternatives for BRICS currency, common currency. How much it succeeds depends. What is the stand of India? India earlier was saying no to common BRICS currency, but very recently they have said, okay, they are studying this proposal and so on. So Putin is going to push this thing very hard this year, that something should happen, I mean, in this arena, and we have to see actually what happens.
Okay, thank you, Professor Upadhyay, for explaining the concept of multipolarity and how the BRICS is playing an important role in enhancing this concept. So now let's move forward in our discussion, and I would like to bring some important aspects of our discussion today about BRICS. My question now is to Ambassador Sanjay. So what do you think, what are the specific challenges and opportunities does BRICS Plus presents to its member countries, particularly for India?
As we had been discussing, BRICS has always been a constantly evolving institution in terms of the scope of work that it does, and also in terms of the kind of review that it undertakes on its own work, and also for looking for new instruments to implement common good for its own people and for the broader community of the developing countries. So the current situation is one in which we do find, as Professor Upadhyay also mentioned, about multipolarity coming in as a much greater entity. The key issue before us today is that the geo-economic developments that have happened, particularly in Asia and increasingly in Africa, are not reflected in the geopolitical or geostrategic reality that exists in the world today, and does not seem to be moving in the direction that these countries would wish it to move towards. And therefore, you do need organizations that will speak out for this coherence of geoeconomics and geostrategy. So in this, what happens is we find it as India, and remember we had been at the heart of the non-aligned movement at one point of time. And I remember when I was in Cairo, I came across this photograph of Pandit Nehru, President Nasser, and President Tito, who had met in Cairo, looking at the Nile and talking of how they would bring that coherence in terms of changing the global structures such that they would be reflective of the aspirations of the developing world and not be aligned with any particular group. So in other words, the idea that they had promoted was that a partnership was much stronger than an alliance. In other words, the kind of democracy that we all wanted and pursued would have greater flexibility in that particular aspect. So today, if we look at the global institutions, and one of them, of course, is the institution of the UN, the United Nations and its associated agencies. The organized institutions are the World Bank and the IMF. you find that while they have done extremely good work over the decades, they have become somewhat lost in terms of the perspective of today's realities. And therefore, you find that there is a trend for new regional or plurilateral groups to come about. BRICS is one of those. You also find that the dictatorship of the G7 is no longer possible, because in this globalized world, everybody counts. And the transition from G7 to G20 happened because G7 was unable to actually implement the ideas that it had for its own vision of global governance and dominance. And therefore, other countries had to be taken in. The BRICS has been an extremely important movement in this consideration. So if I were to look at what are the most important things that BRICS is looking for, and particularly from the perspective of India, the first obviously is development. And I think the path of development has been extremely good and positive for many of us, while the OECD countries have slowed down have faced economic slowdown, but our growth seems to be growing well. We need to have much greater collaboration, not only amongst BRICS and BRICS plus countries, which includes those beyond the new members, actually. We also need to have collaboration with the developed world. The second key idea that I think BRICS has very high on its agenda is global governance. It's been extremely difficult to change the structure and pattern and functioning of the UN and the Security Council in particular, and that's because of power politics. In fact, there are members of the BRICS association itself, which are opposed to changes in the UN and the UN Security Council. So that's going to be a big challenge. But they run the peril of making that organization and themselves relatively redundant. In other words, if there is a country that opposes the reform that is necessary in the UN and the Security Council, which is along with the wishes of the developing world, they will lose the relevance that they think that they are trying to secure. So they be better prepared about the perils of trying to block progress, because progress cannot be blocked. It's going to happen. The third manner in which that we need to and we would wish to focus on is on the financing mechanisms. And I think I'd mentioned earlier about the NDB, but there is much greater effort that is required through the regional development banks and indeed through the Bretton Woods institutions, because there is reform that is needed in the IMF and the IBRD World Bank structure as well, in which there is greater voting rights and in the governance of these institutions. And I think that's what BRICS as a body will certainly wish to do. Finally, because we are constantly in this world of change where transformation is so very important, where technology and innovation are the need of the day, where the demographics is changing, where more and more young people are getting into decision-making processes, it is important that when we evolve as a group, we have a role for all this in a very direct manner. BRICS has till now been a very progressive body in terms of the agenda that it has. Not only in terms of the new technologies, new industry, but also in terms of collaboration on statistical information, on space-based data, in bringing the young people together, whether it is youth games or bringing, speaking out for gender empowerment. There's a BRICS Women, which works very actively. So I think if we can proceed on these three platforms of development, governance, and future agenda, BRICS will be on a very strong wicket. Thank you.
Thanks, Ambassador Sanjay, for your enlightening answer to my question regarding challenges and opportunities to BRICS Plus, and what does these challenges are presenting to its members and particularly to India. Now I would like to move to Professor Upadhyay and ask a question related more to economics, since you are an economist. So how can BRICS Plus contribute to addressing pressing global issues such as climate change and economic development, especially for Southern countries?
The economic questions actually, I mean, related to development and so on. So that's very important. Climate change is something different. So as we have been, I mean, talking about, you already have the establishment of the NDB, National Development, this bank, New Development Bank. So a lot of money, so many projects, $30 billion worth of projects have been given out. India is one of the important country there, original countries. So a lot of, I mean, money actually is coming to our country also that way. And now, given that with recent addition to the membership, look at, I mean, the inclusion of Saudi Arabia, Iran, and UAE, which are oil-rich countries. Not only that, but these are also the countries actually which have a lot of money. I mean, not Iran, but at least Saudi Arabia and UAE and so on. So, I mean, this working of the NDB, availability of money, energy security, and so on. So in terms of, if you look at the global energy politics and so on, so most of the countries which have oil now are part of the BRICS. And consider this possibility also that some more countries might join very soon and so on. So this possibility that energy exchanges and so on, import, exports, possibility within BRICS, and also this aspect that you may do these things in your own currency, that possibility is also very important. Because earlier, all these things were done in dollars. So that's why actually dollar is called petrodollar, because oil was so important in global trade. And since most of the oil trades were done in dollars, so that's how, I mean, historically, dollar was able to acquire this dominance globally. Remember, actually, there was one period of time when they used to say, okay, and they used to talk, for example, in Libya, Iraq, places like that, that we will de-dollarize. But what did it mean? In those days, de-dollarization meant that, okay, not dollar, but euro. You do these things in euro. But now everybody knows, global South countries know that there's no such difference between Europe and US. So euro, dollar, they're same. If you have problem with dollar, if you have problem with America, you can also have problem with euro. So when, I mean, people talk about de-dollarization, that means actually using local currencies of these countries. And which are these countries? The BRICS countries are the main countries here. For example, China, India, Russia, UAE, Saudi Arabia, and so on. So now the meaning of de-dollarization also has changed. It's not moving away from dollar to euro. It's actually moving away from dollar, euro to, I mean, these local currencies of these countries, which are mainly the BRICS countries and so on. So that way. So a lot of problems developing countries encounter. That is because they get into this debt, high debt. Look at Sri Lanka, what happened. Look at Argentina, $50 billion worth of debt. And from where to get money? Pakistan, from where to get money and so on. But suppose, I mean, we are able to do our own things, our own trade in our own currency. So that's going to contribute to development in a way which has less constraints. Earlier, dollar availability was a big thing. From where you get dollars? For example, India. I mean, some of these BRICS countries are exporting countries, most of them. But India is not. I mean, India is able to export IT services, so that's why we get some money. But in terms of goods, physical things, merchandise trade, we don't export that much. So this is a major issue for us. But again, I mean, things are not so simple. There will be problems, and there will be problems where that India may say, okay, we don't want to accept domination of Chinese yuan and so on. So all those problems are going to come and so. And the question of climate change, climate issues are there. I mean, but very briefly, my own feeling is that as long as you have these wars going on, the world is not really going to pay much attention to climate issues. If Ukraine war continues, if the war in Israel, Gaza, and that continues, the whole focus of the whole world is now on war. What it means? It means that every country will say, okay, we are going to increase defense budget. Look at what's happening in Europe. Now there's a pressure on Europe to increase defense budget. A few years ago, actually, I mean, there were so much talk of climate issues in Europe. They are going to get rid of nuclear energy. They're going to get rid of coal, oil, everything, and so on. So the green thing. But everything is changed now because of Ukraine war. So unless actually we tackle the issues, if we have anti-war movements globally, you can't do much about climate. I mean, China, for example, is increasing defense budget. India will increase its own defense budget. You will have more ships in all oceans and so on. So where is the climate then? So my personal feeling is that unless two issues are taken up first, anti-war and distribution. Look at what's happening to farmers, not only here, but in all European countries. What are they saying? They're saying, okay, the farming community should reduce these greenhouse gases and so on. Don't eat meat, reduce your cattle size, everything and so on. But farmers are on the street. So what is this question? This question is that unless you tackle the question of disparity, I mean, you have people who have $200 billion worth of wealth and so on. And you go and ask farmers, don't do that. So emphasis has to be that, I mean, deal with this disparity in the city centers and go to the farming sector later on. I mean, why should there be billionaires? Actually, the movement should be that we should get rid of this term billionaire from the dictionary. That is what actually the kind of slogan the climate change people should adopt. Unless you convince people, unless farmers know that city people are also doing something, how can you go and ask them, poor people, that you do something? So these are the issues.
Okay, so let's open the floor also to our participants to ask some questions, and then I will return back with a couple of questions to my panelists. So students, do you have questions to ask? You don't have questions. So my next question is to Ambassador Sanjay. So some critiques argue that BRICS Plus is mainly driven by self-interest rather than a genuine commitment to multipolarity order. So how do you respond to this criticism?
I think these two ideas are not necessarily, it's not that they necessarily cannot go together. There is genuine national interest, but part of that national interest is also the realization of multipolarity. I think I look at multipolarity in a slightly broader context of how governance is to be administered. And I think today's world is one in which international or global governance has become increasingly important. If you want resolutions that will have impact, you will need to have them passed in the UN Security Council. Today, the UN Security Council cannot pass a resolution because everything else could be controversial and there could be a veto. You can probably have a judgment of the International Court of Justice, but it cannot be implemented because the Security Council will have a veto on that. You look at the kind of governance that is happening in the WTO, for instance. It has become so difficult to have a multilateral pact which is cognizant and understanding and accepting of the different aspirations of different groups. And very often, because the countervailing force that the developing world has, it means that they cannot get their decisions in the WTO. We just had the ministerial where we did not reach a conclusion. I think what has also happened at the same time is that most of the world coming out of colonialism, as Professor Upadhyaya had explained, have now had development. And so the level at which they are operating is at a much better level, and their aspirations are much better informed. And their aspirations are more demanding than they were in the past. And that's where I think this idea of multipolarity comes about. So in other words, it's not that every pole is an equal power. There is still difference of power in the world. There is still bargaining that you have to do. But unlike in the past, when some powers might have untrammeled force to force a decision or power to force a decision, it's becoming less possible today. And in this multipolar world, the governance structures need to be changed. So I think in that, BRICS has an extremely important role, because we also have to understand that groupings like BRICS or G7, G20 do not take decisions that are going to impact the rest of the world. They can take decisions which only affect their conditions. So the intra-BRICS issues, you can have a decision, but you cannot take a decision for the others. It's the same for G20. But it does play a very important role, because the kind of consensus that you can evolve in BRICS or in G20 is useful when you then finally go and negotiate either under the COP process on climate change, or in the WTO on trade-related issues, or when you go to the General Assembly on political or development issues, on security-related issues. So this is a forming of a partnership. And that's why I say that the old system in which alliances were important, and then one power would say, you better listen to me because I know better than you, is dying out, because we are not as weak as we were in the past. Today, all of us have a little bit of power, maybe not as much as we would like to. We'd like to go further. But I think BRICS is one instrument, because it's a grouping of countries. Initially it was a grouping in a sense broadly geographic as well, representing all the continents. Now we have the major regional powers. There's an idea of middle power that has come about. And major regional powers are now represented. The other thing also which is important to note is that in today's world, you cannot say, I'll not talk to you. The old days when the Soviet Union and the Americans would not talk to each other because there was so much at loggerheads on an ideological basis. Or you would even have issues between say, Saudi and Iran at a certain level. But today, they're together in BRICS. And I think in many ways, countries like India do form that bridge. And I'm so happy that countries like Egypt are now part of it, because we have traditionally played that role of being the bridge. We need everyone to meet and talk to each other, because unless you talk and discuss, you cannot really understand what the way forward is. So I think, obviously, you are promoting national interest. But I think your national interest today in a globalized world also includes this element of multipolarity, which can make governance a much better structure for us.
Yes, right. I also agree with you, Ambassador Sanjay. Okay, please introduce yourself first.
Question regarding the withdrawal of Argentina from BRICS. So how do you see the impact of it, and what should be or what would be the reasons behind it? Can we say US influence was there when Argentina withdrew? That's one. To you.
Right.
And to say regarding the economic impact that it would have in the BRICS alliance. Yes, considering its inflation.
Right. So, BRICS 5 sought to become BRICS 11 with the inclusion of 6 more countries. And Argentina was included as an applicant to represent South America in many ways, because Brazil was alone over there. And I was very, very happy in the early days when this expansion was announced and was proposed, because for the first time, it actually had a much broader representation from Africa, a continent that is often lost out in a lot of the discussions and debates that happen in the world, quite forgetting that Africa is absolutely the continent of the future. The reason why these countries were included was through a very complex set of proposals that were launched by the countries themselves in their applications, as well as the evaluation. And of course, it was also pointed out when this round of expansion took place that this is not necessarily the final grouping. I don't know if BRICS wants to become like another G77 or become the UN with all the countries of the world. But I think there is some merit in a certain sense of exclusivity, because you can then devote energy much more focused manner, and also you can have an influence in the neighborhood that you inhabit, in the region around you. When this expansion was taking place, there was a perception that was brought about, and which was why I had pointed out in my initial remarks that there is a perception in some parts of the intelligentsia that BRICS is a grouping that is opposed to certain other groupings or to certain alliances. And primarily, the mention has often been made about G7 and being opposed to the United States. Now, I, for one, do not believe that we are in a G2. In other words, China is not a superpower. I believe China is another one of those middle powers, which has grown. It is a significant power. But China is not a superpower. There's no G2 at the moment. I still think the predominant power and influence maker is the United States. And China itself is always trying to have certain understandings with the United States. In this world, the multipolarity aspect of it comes out through everyone else. But if there is a debate that the United States is being targeted, and if there is a certain political process through which, a leader of a certain conviction of the right comes about, there is a much greater tendency towards saying that, okay, I am an ally of the United States, and therefore I cannot get into a partnership with something else. India has demonstrated time and again that my prime minister or foreign minister can travel from Riyadh to Tehran, can travel from Palestine to Israel. And we've done this again because we believe everybody must talk. So I think the decision of the Argentinians to not accept the proposal for membership, which they had applied for, is perhaps the best thing in their judgment, and I respect them for that. But I think it is a missed opportunity for Argentina. And it is a missed opportunity for the South African continent, because that is another part of the world where I think we need to shake ourselves out of these old ideologies and to really have solutions where partnerships can develop, where you can have democratic discussions so that you can reach fruitful outcomes. And Argentina would have been a great partner in that process.
Professor Upadhyay?
Actually, there was only an invitation to Argentina to join. Okay. And before, January 1st, they withdrew. So that way, it didn't really affect working of the BRICS. Suppose Argentina had joined BRICS and then withdrew, that would have had much more impact on the BRICS prospect. People would say, okay, a country are coming and leaving. But this happened before they were to join in January. So that's one thing. The economic part actually, in a way, look at the situation of Argentina. This is in a very big mess. More than $50 billion worth of debt to IMF and so on. And recently, if you read the news, 250% rate of inflation. No other BRICS country is like that. The 10 countries are quite stable. So good. I mean, I consider that, I mean, it would have been very difficult for the 10 BRICS countries to handle Argentina if Argentina was part of BRICS. Because a country has to do something for itself. Outsiders can't help you much unless you do. Like, for example, case of Pakistan. If Pakistan, I mean, does not take care of itself, how much Saudi Arabia, UAE, China, or anybody can help? So that is the situation Argentina is in right now. So Argentina has to see that what happens to it. A lot of problems there, economic and so on. So that way. And they're saying, okay, they will have their own, I mean, remove their own currency, have dollar their currency and so on. So let them experiment. So that's a good thing for BRICS. Otherwise, BRICS would have been in problem.
So actually, we are running out of time because it is now 5 to 4 p.m. So I would like to conclude this session by thanking my esteemed panelists for today, Ambassador Sanjay Bhattacharya and Professor V. Upadhyay, for sharing their insights and engaging in this fruitful discussion. And also I would like to thank my participants for today. And we shall continue our discussion on BRICS Plus and multipolarity in future coming discussions. So thank you all, and let's now present the mementos to our esteemed guest. Vartika, please. So we'll have pictures also.
Oh, the scarf.
Yeah, so let's,
Thank you.
Thanks. So we really appreciate that you have made your time to join us today.
Thank you.
Lecture. Thanks.
Thank you very much. We take a group.
Yeah, let's have pictures.
We can put this before.
Yes.
Come.
Here, okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Professor,
Thanks.
it's so lovely.
Thanks, Professor.
Professor.